Imagine for a second just a scenario where the educational institution you attend, right, the bank that's financing your student loans, the company that ultimately hires you after graduation, and the aggressive debt collector coming after you when you inevitably miss a payment.
Right.
Imagine they're all secretly owned by the exact same billionaire.
Oh, man. I mean, it sounds like a dystopian thriller or something, or maybe just like a completely broken, incredibly cynical game of Monopoly where one player just starts with all the property.
Yeah. That is exactly what it feels like. But today, our deep dive into the source material, which are excerpts from John Grisham's novel The Rooster Bar, shows us the terrifying mechanics of how a machine like that could actually operate in the real world.
Yeah, we're looking at a group of third-year law students at Foggy Bottom Law School. They're in Washington, D.C., and they are drowning in a combined debt of nearly $1 million.
Almost $1 million.
Yeah, spread across just 4 people.
That's crazy.
And, I mean, the mission for this deep dive is to explore the factual sequence of events and the character arcs that are detailed in these texts. We really want to look at a system that is fundamentally engineered to profit off of their desperation and, trace exactly how that breaks a person down.
Okay, let's unpack this because we're going to look at the nuts and bolts of a brilliantly ruthless and completely legal educational scam. We'll explore the devastating psychological toll it takes on the victims trapped inside it. And finally, we'll examine the desperate illegal measures these students take just to survive.
Right. And to see how these students end up pushed to the absolute brink, you really have to look at the paperwork first.
Yeah.
You have to map out the financial architecture they are wandering through, completely blind. And the way this architecture is uncovered in the text is, well, it's incredibly dramatic.
Oh, for sure.
It's discovered by one of the students, a young man named Gordy Tanner.
Right. And Gordy's discovery, it doesn't happen in some neat, organized classroom setting where he's calmly reviewing corporate filings.
Not at all.
Gordy suffers from bipolar disorder, and he has stopped taking his medication. He basically locks himself in his apartment, completely manic, awake for days, drinking tequila, and he creates this massive conspiracy wall.
Yeah, it's intense.
Picture flowcharts, red marker, push pins, and printouts of corporate executives connecting a web of shell companies. And at the very top of this wall is a secretive Wall Street billionaire named Heinz Rackley.
It's a scene straight out of a paranoid thriller, honestly. But the flowcharts Gordy creates in that room are incredibly precise. He traces exactly how Rackley's empire operates.
Breaking it down piece by piece.
Exactly. Rackley uses private shell companies' entities with names designed to sound completely innocuous, like Shiloh Square Financial and Veranda Capital.
Right, very boring, safe-sounding names.
Exactly. And those entities control a larger holding company called Batrium Group. Batrium, in turn, owns Foggy Bottom Law School, along with 7 other for-profit law schools across the country.
Wait, so this one billionaire owns a chain of 8 law schools?
Yep, 8 of them.
And the business model here isn't about producing the next generation of great legal minds. It's not about prestige. It's an absolute vacuum, designed to suck up federal loan money.
And that is the core of the engine right there. Back in 2006, changes in federal law created a landscape where it became incredibly easy for graduate students to borrow essentially unlimited amounts of money for tuition.
And living expenses, right.
Yes, and living expenses. All of it fully backed by the federal government. Rackley schools looked at that legislation and realized they didn't need to be selective. They just needed bodies to sign on the dotted line.
Just churning them through.
Right. They admit almost anyone who applies and qualifies for those federal loans. And since the government is backing them, virtually everyone qualifies.
They literally do not care about your test scores. Like the source text gives us a great comparison here. Entering students at a top-tier school like Georgetown, they have average LSAT scores somewhere around a 165.
Right.
At Foggy Bottom, the average is estimated to be around 140. Which means, just looking at the statistics, these students only have about a 50% chance of ever actually passing the bar exam.
Right. Half of them are statistically doomed from day one.
Exactly.
But the school still charges them $45,000 a year in tuition.
Wow.
It's a pure volume business. They pack hundreds of students into a single lecture hall, pay the professors relatively little compared to elite institutions, and clear massive profit margins.
I mean, the dean of Foggy Bottom, for example, pulls in $800,000 a year just to act as the respectable frontman for this operation.
Right. Keep the operating costs low, admit everyone, and let millions in federal loan money pour directly into Batrium Group's accounts.
But if you're a prospective student, you don't see any of that. You are sold a dream. You see these glossy marketing brochures promising six-figure salaries at high-powered law firms.
Which is such a trap.
It is, and it brings up a huge question. If they're graduating from a subpar school with terrible bar passage rates, how on earth is Foggy Bottom legally allowed to publish those kinds of employment statistics? Like, where are those jobs coming from?
What's fascinating here is how Rackley manipulates those very statistics. Gordy's wall reveals that Rackley, through his various shell companies, also owns 4 low-tier, high-volume law firms across the country.
Yeah.
We're talking about firms like Quinn and Verdoliak in New York. These aren't prestigious white shoe firms. They're essentially legal sweatshops handling foreclosures, bankruptcies, and low-level debt collection.
Right.
And these firms deliberately hire a significant percentage of their new lawyers straight from Rackley's own law schools.
Wait, so he is artificially inflating the demand for his own students? He's hiring his own graduates just to juke the stats?
Exactly. But it gets worse. They hire these new grads at what look like fantastic starting salaries, say $125,000 a year.
Which looks great on a brochure.
Right. Foggy Bottom immediately uses the smiling faces of these newly hired grads, along with that salary figure, in all their marketing materials to lure in the next massive batch of unsuspecting students.
Unbelievable.
But then, after a year or so, the law firm slowly starts slashing their pay. They cite sudden budget cuts or failure to meet impossible billable hour quotas until the lawyers either quit in sheer frustration or find themselves grinding away 80 hours a week for a tiny fraction of what they were initially promised.
That is incredibly sinister. Rackley is essentially willing to take a small temporary loss on a law firm's balance sheet by overpaying a few first-year associates, because that fake salary data allows him to pull in tens of millions of dollars in new tuition money at the law school.
And the math works out perfectly for him.
It really does, and it goes even deeper. Rackley also owns a private student loan company called Sorvan Lenders, just in case students need even more cash beyond what the government provides. And if you eventually default on your federal loans because your fake job disappeared, who comes after you? A ruthless debt collection agency called Passant, which, surprise, Rackley also owns a chunk of.
It is a totally closed loop of profit. Every time the student struggles, a different tentacle of Rackley's empire makes money.
It's exactly like a rigged casino. The house owns the blackjack tables where you lose your money. They own the ATM in the lobby where you pull out more cash to chase your losses. They own the pawn shop down the street where you sell your watch. And they employ the loan sharks waiting for you in the alley outside.
It is like a casino, yeah, but with one terrifying difference for you to consider as a listener. In a casino, you walk in knowing you are gambling. You know the house has the edge.
That's true.
These students walked into Foggy Bottom thinking they were making a safe, societally approved investment in their future. They thought they were buying security, not pulling a slot machine lever.
That is a really great point.
Yeah.
But let me push back for a second on the source of all this information. You mentioned Gordy's condition earlier. When he presents this to his friends, he has been awake for days, he is completely off his bipolar meds, he's drinking heavily, and he literally throws a coffee cup at the wall during his presentation.
Yeah, he's in a really bad place.
Right. If you walked into your friend's apartment and saw that, you'd think they were having a psychotic break. How do we know this isn't just a paranoid delusion?
It's a totally fair question. And it's exactly what his friends, Mark and Todd, are thinking when they first walk into that apartment and see all the string and the push pins.
Right, they must have been terrified.
They were. But the math validates the paranoia. Whether Gordy was in a manic state or not, the numbers attached to his friends' names are horrifyingly real. Mark is carrying $266,000 in debt.
Wow.
Todd owes $195,000. Gordy himself owes $276,000. And for Rackley, this entire scheme is entirely risk-free.
Because of the federal backing.
Exactly. If these students default, and statistically, a huge portion of them, will the American taxpayers pick up the tab for those federally backed loans. Rackley gets to privatize all of the profits and socialize all of the losses. The system works exactly as Gordy mapped it out.
The ultimate rigged game. But realizing that the game is rigged against you is only half the battle. Living under the crushing weight of that realization has profound, real-world consequences. I mean, it breaks people.
It really does. You're suddenly trapped in a pressure cooker environment. You have the sudden terrifying realization that there are no real jobs waiting for you. You have the suffocating weight of hundreds of thousands of dollars in non-dischargeable debt.
Which you can't even get rid of in bankruptcy.
Right. And on top of that, you have the deep psychological shame of feeling like you've been played for a fool.
And for Gordy, that pressure becomes fatal. You have a guy who is unmedicated, who is actively avoiding his fiancée because he desperately wants to call off their wedding, but simply doesn't have the courage to do it.
Yeah.
And then he gets a sudden DUI arrest. And that DUI is just the nail in the coffin, because he knows a criminal record will likely prevent him from ever passing the character and fitness portion of the bar exam, even if he manages to pass the test itself.
His exit strategy is completely gone.
It is. His friends Mark, Todd, and Zola try desperately to keep him safe. They literally sleep on the floor of his apartment in shifts to watch him. But the psychological weight is too much. He sneaks out in the middle of the night.
And it ends in an absolute tragedy. Gordy drives his car to the Arlington Memorial Bridge, stops right in the middle of the road, and jumps into the icy Potomac River.
It's just a gut-wrenching sequence in the text. And while Mark and Todd are dealing with the immediate visceral shock of having to go down to the morgue to identify their friend's body and facing the raw anger of his grieving family, their friend Zola Maal is dealing with an entirely separate, equally systemic nightmare.
Right. Zola is the fourth member of this core group. She's carrying $191,000 in student debt herself. But her immediate crisis has nothing to do with law school. It involves her family.
Right.
They are undocumented immigrants from Senegal who fled to the U.S. and have lived and worked peacefully in the country for 26 years.
Right. And her father was caught up in a grand larceny accusation at his workplace. The charge was entirely false and was ultimately dismissed, but the mere act of being fingerprinted in the system triggered deportation proceedings with Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or ICE.
Yeah, it's an automated process.
So while her friends are mourning Gordy, Zola gets the call that ICE has swept up her parents and her brother and transported them to a federal detention facility in Pennsylvania to await a forced flight back to Senegal.
Yeah. And when Zola, Mark, and Todd drive out to Pennsylvania to try and visit her family, the text describes the Bardstown Federal Detention Facility in very specific, factual terms.
Very bleak terms.
Yes. It is located deep in a secluded valley, entirely surrounded by double chain link fencing and massive rolls of razor wire, giving it this incredibly bleak, Auschwitz-like appearance in the middle of the American countryside.
The source also details the underlying mechanics of how a facility like this operates, which really echoes the financial trap of their law school.
It does.
Like ICE operates on a $2 billion annual budget for detention. Congress actually mandates a specific daily quota for how many people must be held in these beds.
Yeah.
And 2/3 of all these facilities are run by private contractors.
Right.
That means the more human bodies they process and house, the more money those private companies make.
It is a system where the human element is entirely stripped away by the bureaucracy. When Zola arrives at the front desk, terrified for her family, the clerks flatly refuse to let her see her parents.
Just instantly shut down.
Yeah. They cite standard processing paperwork, completely indifferent to the fact that her family is about to be deported permanently. To the clerks, Zola's family isn't a family being torn apart. They are just inventory moving through a supply chain.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Mark, who is exhausted, actively grieving his dead friend, and furiously angry at the entire legal establishment, decides he has simply had enough of bureaucracies telling him no.
He just slaps.
He does. He steps up to that counter and starts aggressively acting like a high-powered, incredibly litigious attorney. He demands the first and last names of every clerk in the room. He demands the names of every armed ICE agent standing by the doors. He demands the supervisor.
And he pulls out his cell phone. Right?
Yes. He pulls out his phone, fakes a call to a senior litigation partner at a major firm, and loudly threatens to file a massive federal lawsuit the very next morning. He names them all individually, promising to personally garnish their government paychecks and put devastating financial lands on their homes.
And the craziest part is, it works. The supervisor comes out, panics at the threat of personal financial ruin, and immediately bypasses the bureaucracy to grant Zola the visit.
It's wild.
Mark realizes something profound in that moment. He realizes that the system doesn't actually operate on justice or credentials. It operates on intimidation and assumed authority.
Right.
No one at that facility paused to ask to see his law license. They just reacted to his aggressive posture, his command of the legal jargon, and his suit.
It plants a massive seed in his mind. Think about where Mark and Todd are at this exact moment. They are confronted with Gordy's suicide. which was driven by insurmountable debt.
Yeah.
They just watched Zola's family be locked up in a profit-driven detention center. And they have the undeniable proof from Gordy's wall that their law degrees are financially worthless. They reach a collective breaking point.
They realize that playing by the rules of a rigged system only guarantees that you will lose. If the game is corrupt from the billionaire at the top all the way down to the low-level debt collectors, the only logical way to survive is to stop playing by their rules altogether.
And the final straw comes for Mark shortly after Gordy's funeral. He is driving back with Todd and Zola. He checks his phone, and he sees an email from M. Everett Bowling.
Oh, this part is brutal.
It really is. Bowling is the managing partner at Ness Skelton, a prominent lobbying firm where Mark had supposedly secured a post-graduation job. The email coldly informs him that due to a sudden corporate merger, his job offer is entirely rescinded.
Just like that.
He is fired before he even works a single day. Terminated via a cold, automated-sounding email.
That is the catalyst for the entire second half of their story. Mark and Todd decide they have to escape the trap. They hatch a highly illegal strategy to completely disappear from the system.
They decide to drop out of Foggy Bottom Law School immediately. And this is crucial to understanding how the federal loan system can be exploited. They hide the fact that they are dropping out from the administration.
Because of the timing.
Right. It's the first day of the spring semester. This means the Department of Education has just wired the massive federal loan disbursement directly to the school.
Yeah.
The school automatically takes its $22,500 cut for the semester's tuition and then hands the students their $10,000 checks intended for living expenses. Mark and Todd quietly collect their final checks, deposit them, pack their bags, and vanish from their apartments.
Their plan is to evade the debt collectors entirely. By pretending they are still actively enrolled in classes, they trick the system into delaying the repayment process.
Buying themselves time.
Right. They figure they have about a 9-month window before the school formally fails them, notifies the government, and the loans officially go into default. That gives them exactly 9 months to build a brand new life entirely off the grid.
And the life they choose to build is incredibly audacious. They find a professional forger working out of a garage in Bethesda and pay cash for perfect, high-quality fake driver's licenses. Mark Frazier officially becomes Mark Upshaw. Todd Lucero becomes Todd Lane.
And they rent out a grungy 3-room storage space on the top floor above a dive joint called the Rooster Bar, which happens to be owned by Todd's old boss, a local bookie named Maynard.
Yeah.
They go out and buy cheap, flashy suits. They start growing out their beards to alter their appearance. And they set up a completely fake law firm, Upshaw, Parker, and Lane.
Okay, wait, let me stop you right there.
Yeah.
'Cause I have to push back on this logic.
Okay, go ahead.
They are furious at Heinz Rackley for running a corrupt, predatory legal scam. They absolutely despise the sleazy, low-end lawyers who prey on vulnerable people. So their grand solution to taking down a predatory system is to commit multiple felonies by practicing law without a license.
It's a huge pivot.
Aren't they just becoming the exact same bottom feeders that they profess to hate?
It is a profound moral contradiction, and the text doesn't shy away from that. But if we connect this to the bigger picture of what they've learned, it makes a twisted kind of sense. Remember, Mark and Todd spent days sitting in the back rows of the D.C. municipal and criminal courts, just observing how the lower-level justice system actually functions in practice. What they saw wasn't an episode of Law & Order. It is a chaotic, completely overwhelmed assembly line.
Right. They watch these guys, licensed lawyers like Daryl Cromley and Preston Kline, literally wandering the hallways of the courthouse or hanging out in the waiting room of the city jail.
Exactly.
They walk up to terrified, desperate people who were just arrested the night before for a DUI or a simple assault, and they demand $1,000 in cash right on the spot to represent them.
And that's the key. They saw that in this specific low-level ecosystem, nobody is checking credentials. The judges are incredibly bored and just want to clear the docket. The prosecutors are wildly overworked with hundreds of cases a week, and the clients are too desperate and uneducated in the law to ask questions.
It's entirely a cash business.
Yes. Mark and Todd figure that if a guy like Preston Kline can do it, they can easily hustle these cash-paying DUI and misdemeanor defendants just as well.
And they bring Zola into the fold to be the Parker in Upshaw, Parker, and Lane. They convince her to start trolling hospital emergency rooms to find personal injury cases, actively looking for car wreck victims. They can sign up to sue insurance companies for quick settlements.
What's crucial to understand is that Mark and Todd don't view what they're doing as malicious fraud against the public. They aren't trying to become billionaires like Heinz Rackley, hoarding wealth in offshore shell companies.
They're just trying to survive.
Exactly. They view this fake law firm as an act of absolute survival. They are trapped in an unsustainable reality, facing complete financial ruin that will follow them until the day they die, and this illegal operation is the only escape hatch they can find.
It really makes you think about our own reliance on these massive systems.
Yeah.
If you're listening to this, think about how heavily you rely on institutions every single day.
Oh, for sure.
We rely on universities to educate us and give us a fair shot at the job market. We rely on banks to finance our lives honestly. We rely on the legal system to protect us when things go wrong.
Right.
When those institutions prioritize raw profit over human outcomes, it is incredibly easy to end up feeling like you are just a number on a spreadsheet, exactly like Gordy, Mark, Todd, and Zola.
It shows us that trust in our societal systems is incredibly fragile. From the time we're kids, we are told that there is a societal contract. If you work hard, get an education, take on reasonable debt, and play by the rules, you will be rewarded with a stable, respectable life.
That's the promise.
But the events we've unpacked today show what happens when that contract is secretly rewritten by those at the top, leaving you to foot the bill.
So what does this all mean? It means that when trust in the system breaks, the fallout is devastating. It cost Gordy his life on that bridge. It cost Zola's family their freedom in a Pennsylvania detention center. And it cost Mark and Todd their real identities, forcing them to become ghosts just to survive.
Which leaves us with a critical, uncomfortable question to consider.
What's that?
If the societal contract dictates that hard work and education lead to a stable life, but a billionaire legally rigs that exact contract to ensure that you fail while he profits, does breaking the law to escape that trap make you a criminal? Or does it make you a revolutionary, just trying to survive the rules of a completely broken game?
We'll leave you with that to think about.